If statements using else are helpful if we have two outcomes, meaning yes or no. But what if we had three outcomes instead of two? Well, we can use the if-else logic, but it gets long and complicated, especially when you use lots of nested if statements. Now, instead, we can use the if and ELIF logic. And ELIF means else if. So in this scenario here, let's assume that an army of 3 right here beats an army of 2. And an army of 2 characters can beat an army of 1. So let's write an if statement that uses ELIF. So let's start by asking a question. So let me type this in. Army size equals input. How many characters are there in the army? Please enter 1, 2, or 3. Then let's add an if statement. If army size is equal to 1, don't forget to use double equals. Print the army of 1 will lose to the army of 2 and the army of 3. Now let's add an ELIF. So let's go here. ELIF, army size, double equals, don't forget that, 2. Then we're gonna type here, print the army of 2 will beat the army of 1, but lose to the army of 3. Then let's add another ELIF right here. ELIF army size is equal to 3. Then we'll print the army of 3 beats the army of 2 and the army of 1. Now let's run this code. How many characters are there in the army? Enter 1, 2, or 3. Let's enter 1. The army of 1 will lose the army of 2 and the army of 3. Let's do it 2 more times. How many characters? 2. The army of 2 will beat the army of 1, but lose the army of 3. And lastly, how many characters? 3. The army of 3 beats the army of 2 and the army of 1. Now, let's take a step back and just think about how complicated this would all be if we didn't use ELIF, meaning if we created many nested if comments. All right, let's add one more thing to our code, which is if the user entered something other than 1, 2, or 3, if they enter something other than 1, 2, or 3, we should print, please only enter 1, 2, or 3. If you want, you can pause me and try this yourself. Okay, there's a couple ways to do this. And again, getting errors in Python is awesome, as it's the best way to learn. Imagine if you played a video game and you beat the entire game right away. It'd be really boring, be easy, it wouldn't be a top seller. But there's so many ways to learn. For example, if you forgot to indent, or if you forgot to make the type lowercase, or if you forgot to add a colon, etc. Okay, so one way to write this here would be to use else. So I would go else, and it automatically indents. Print, please only enter 1, 2, or 3. All right, let's run this code. And this time, let's enter in another number. Please only enter 1, 2, or 3. And we're going to show you another way to do this in a second. Now, another way to write the code is to use not equals. Now, intuitively, we think that not equals would be written as 2 arrow things like this. But we get an error if we type that. So the way to do not equals is to do exclamation point equals. So let's add another ELIF statement that uses not equals 1, 2, or 3. And in addition to introducing the not equals concept, I'm also going to show you how to use the or concept right here. All right, let's first comment out the 2 lines of code. So let me comment out these 2 here, and I'm going to use these quick keys you see here on the screen to do that. Okay, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to type here ELIF army size, army size, there we go, is not equal to 1 or 2 or 3. Okay. And then if that occurs, I got to put that colon there. Then I'm going to print, I'm going to put this line in here, and I'll just copy it because I'm incredibly lazy. Okay, great. And let's run this code. All right, let me enter in some other cray-cray number. Please only enter 1, 2, or 3. Now, remember to keep the or in lowercase. Now, you might be thinking, why bother putting those numbers in quotes? Do we ever even need the quotes? Well, remember the type function right here. Remember the type function. So let's add a line of code. Print type army size. And let's run the code. So let's type. So the class is string. Okay, so the reason why this works without changing from integer to string is because they're all defined as strings, because everything here is in double quotes. Now, we can do that because we're not doing any calculations at all on any of this stuff here. Now, let's say we want to add something to the bottom of our code here, something along the lines of, let's say each army character costs $10. So an army of 3 would cost $30, an army of 2 would cost $20. So let's add code to the bottom of our code here that prints a message that says the cost of the army is however much it costs. And you can pause me if you want to do this. I'm going to do this in 2 lines of code at the bottom. Okay, now there's many ways to approach this, and I'm just going to show you the way I do it. So the first thing I want to do before I perform a calculation on army size is I want to change it from string type here. I want to change it to integer. Okay, so let me go here and let me just delete this line here. All right, so I'm going to say army size equals integer now, army size. There we go. So now it's an integer. And now what I'm going to do is I am going to print the cost of the army is, whatever it is. Okay, so I'll do it like this. Print the cost of the army is, and then here, I'm going to type army size, whoops, times 10, because it costs $10 per person in the army here. Okay, but this won't work, and I'll show you why. I get an error. And I get an error because it wants this to be a string and not an integer. So what I can do is right here, I can simply type string to convert it back to string so it works here when I concatenate it. Okay, let's run it again. Oops, I forgot to put a closing bracket here. Okay, 2, so I should get $20, right? $20. Okay, let's do it again. And let's type 3, and it's $30. There's so many different ways to do this. But whenever you concatenate or join variables together, they've got to be strings. You got to convert from number to string if that's the case. So have fun with this, play around with this, make a lot of mistakes as well, please. It's the only way we learn. All right, this is fun. Let's talk about another example of using the or statement. So I'm going to add an if statement to the bottom of our code here that tells us if we have an odd number of people in our army. So let me add the code. There's so many ways to do this. So let me add a couple of enters here. And I'm going to type if army size equals 1 or army size equals 3, then print it's odd. I'll show you here. Okay, let's now add an else if it's even. Else, colon, indent, print. I'm so lazy, I'm just going to copy and paste. There are an even number of characters in the army that you selected. Okay, let's run the code. 1. There are an odd number. Okay, let's do it again. 2. They're an even number. Very cool. Now, of course, this code is not perfect because what if somebody enters a number other than 1, 2, or 3? So or means one or the other. One or the other has to be true, meaning 1 or 3, for example. What about using and when coding? Well, and means both items have to be true. It's really powerful when you're programming to use and. So let's add yet another line of code down here, and let me unindent. And this line of code is going to ask us if the team we selected is Army number 1, and do we think that the characters in team 1 is good? Okay, it's a silly example, but it's a fun way to explain the logic here, the and logic, I should say. Now, if you're not a Star Wars fan, there's 3 good guys here. Okay, we got Chewbacca, and Han Solo, who's my favorite. Okay, they're both good. And here we have C-3PO in Army 1, who's good. These people in this army are bad. Although Finn, who used to be a stormtrooper, became good later. Let's just assume bad, good, good for now. Okay, so let's type this. Good or not good equals type good or not good. Then let's add some logic here. If good or not good equals good, and the army size is 1, then you say you select an army of 1 and C-3PO who is good. Or else print, you did not select an army of 1 and good. It's silly, but it's a good way to learn this. Let me type this, and then I'll explain what this means in more detail. All right, let's run this code now. All right, it's getting long, this code here. How many characters? 1. Good or not good? You selected an army of 1 and C-3PO who is good. This is a ridiculous example, but it's the most funnest way I can think of to show you this. Now you're probably thinking, Chris, this is crazy coding, because what if the user selects not good and an army of 2 or 3, and oh my gosh, do I use all these different combinations of good and not good? And I mean, my brain is full. Well, I've got a great solution for you, which was introduced in Python version 3.10 in late 2021, which is the match case concept, which I don't have up here, but I'll put it up there soon. Okay. And in the next video, what we're going to do, the next lesson, is we're going to do an exercise first that helps us practice the ELIF concept as well as the OR and AND logic. Then after we discuss the exercise and answer, then I'm going to introduce the match principle, which you're going to love.